Okay, we're waiting for the tour, so I'm just gonna tour this thing right here. I think it's a museum.
Okay, only looking at that.
It's 2 o'clock. Our tour's at 3, so I still have an hour.
他们这是小路啊，小路就是小路。哦。小路是从隧道里去，没有小路，他们后面水在那都全部都是有个洞。这个后来塌了，这没有水沟，就没水沟，塌了。我知道了，他们是上次我看一个系统在这儿了。啊，不是，看的是这个。这个是我拿掉的，这个印子上面比较弹。是。这个是bets， 这个 bets， 反正这个 bets 嘛。就说这对这个空中有危害，就是 bets。
Yet, with all these discoveries, only 44 miles were mapped. The Mammoth Cave National Park was dedicated in 1941.
就是蝙蝠嘛，就是那种黑的。
With the Cave Research Foundation spearheading the effort, more and more of the cave was mapped in the next few decades. In 1960, explorers from the Cave Research Foundation connected Crystal Cave to colossal, salts, and unknown caves to form the new Flint Ridge system, making it 5 of the world's longest. On September 9th, 1972, a team of 5 men and 1 woman connected the Flint Ridge system to Mammoth Cave, a dramatic discovery that extended the length to 144 miles, without doubt, the longest in the world. The Cave Research Foundation, joined by the Central Kentucky Karst Coalition, continued surveying and making major discoveries, extending Mammoth Cave's known length to nearly 300 miles by 1983. By 2010, the known length had
My
jumped.
name's Jacob. I'm going to be your guide for the 315 Historic Tour today. So we'll tell you a little bit about the tour before we get started, then we'll go ahead and get down inside the cave. Some good news. This tour sells out at over 100 people, okay? And it looks like we have maybe 15 on our tour today. So that's really good news for us. Normally over the course of a cave tour, we're much more worried about getting out on time than we are actually talking about the cave and really anything. So today we should have plenty of time to talk about really whatever you want to. Normally I tell my groups we're going to talk about history on this tour and I'll tell you about the history of Mammoth Cave, but we're going to talk about whatever we want to inside the cave today because we'll have plenty of time. Now what you need to know about this tour before we get started is this is a 2-hour-long tour. We're going to walk about 2 miles inside the cave. Okay, it's going to be less of a walk and more of a hike. Okay, we've got a lot of ups and downs that we're going to do. We also got over 500 stairs that we're going to negotiate on this tour. Okay, so just keep that in mind today. We are also in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. So if you needed to go to the hospital right now, it would take you about an hour.
Attention park visitors, this is the last call for the 315 Historic Tour. Assembled at Shelter A. 315 Historic, Shelter A.
Once we get in the cave, if you have a medical emergency, it will take several hours to get you out of the cave and get you to a hospital. Okay, so just be aware of that today. If you have heart problems, breathing problems, poor circulation, trouble walking long distances, or trouble going up and down stairs, consider those limitations before you decide to take a cave tour today. Okay, we got a couple of obstacles that we're going to traverse over the course of our tour today. The first one is called Fat Man's Misery. Okay, Fat Man's Misery is a keyhole-shaped passageway, and what that means is it's wider at the top, and down around your hips it gets really narrow. Okay, the narrowest point is going to be about 18 inches wide, and that's narrower than my hips. Okay, so the ceiling is about here, so I have to walk like this and walk sideways through that. Okay, and that is from about where we're sitting here to those benches over there under the other pavilion. Okay, that's about how long that passageway is. So a couple 100 feet long. Once you get to the end of Fat Man's Misery, you think it's going to get better, but first it gets worse. Okay, the ceiling stays the same, and the floor comes up 1.5 feet. Okay, so you take a big step up, and now you're walking like this for about the width of this shelter. Okay, that's about 20 feet long. That one's called Tall Man's Misery. All right. The second obstacle that we're going to face on our tour is near the very end. It's about 1.75 miles in. We're going to come to a really pretty vertical cave passageway called Mammoth Dome. And we have a set of stairs in the middle of that vertical cave passageway that goes all the way up to the top. It's about 130 feet from the bottom to the top. Okay, so it'll be a fire tower type staircase. You'll have about 12 steps and a landing, 12 steps and a landing, all the way up to the top. Be about 150 stairs at the end of our tour today. Okay, so we're going to walk you 1.75 miles, pretty much 2 miles, and then make you go up 150 stairs today. Okay, and I say that because you can't come to the bottom of the stairs and look up and decide that you don't want to go. That is your only option at that point. Okay, we have to take you up the steps. There's no way to take you back 2 miles through the rest of the cave tour today. Okay, anybody have any questions or anything you're curious about before we really get started? Once again, my name is Jacob. I'll be up front delivering information to you over the course of this tour. My partner, Ranger Tegan, she's going to be hanging out with us today in the back of the group somewhere. She's got a handful of different jobs over the course of this tour. You may or may not see her at different points, but she's going to join us. If you're ready, folks, go ahead and follow us. We'll meet down at the historic entrance. So welcome to the historic entrance of Mammoth Cave. Once again, my name is Jacob. I'll be your guide for this tour today. Before we get started, there are a few things that we have to go over before every cave tour here at Mammoth Cave. So this is my little government safety card. It has some health and safety regulations on it to help keep us safe on our tour today and also help us keep the cave safe. So bear with me, I'll get through this quickly. The cave is dimly lit, the trails can be uneven or wet, and the ceiling can be low. Please use your handrails. Please watch your step and watch your head as you walk through the cave today. Please stay on the well-marked trails for us. Don't sit, step, or climb on the piles of loose rocks that are off to the sides of the trail. They are dangerous, okay? So we want you to stay on the trail for us. We want to stay together as a group today. I don't think that's going to be an issue for us. That's mostly for our groups of over 100 people. But still, if you're in the back and you look up and you can't see anybody, just try to catch up a little bit. If you would like to take pictures on our tour today, please stop walking, okay? Don't try to walk through the cave looking through your viewfinder. It usually doesn't end well. We also ask that you take this time to turn the flash off on your camera. We do not allow any flash photography inside the cave. Okay, that is a safety concern because of the low light environment inside the cave. If we get a lot of camera flashes going off, that could cause people to become disoriented and even hurt themselves. So go ahead and take the time now to turn those flashes off on your camera. If you want to walk at a slower pace, the slowest pace is always at the front of the group, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for us today. We ask you not to leave anything inside the cave, not take anything from inside the cave, and try not to touch the cave to the best of your ability. We have oils and acids on our hands that will permanently damage the rocks inside the cave if we touch them too much. So if it's a matter of your own personal safety, I want you to grab onto whatever you need to keep yourself safe. But please don't walk through the cave today and run your hand along the wall or the ceiling because you want to know what it feels like. It feels like a rock. Okay? So if you want to know what the cave feels like, before you get inside, you can touch these rocks right here. Exactly what the cave feels like. There will be one exception on our tour today. As you go through Fat Man's Misery, the cave is going to touch you and you're not going to be able to help touch the cave. That's fine. Okay. But notice as we go through that area how much different it looks just from people touching it over the years. No writing or marking on the cave walls. No tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. No weapons, food, or drink other than water allowed on our tour today. Once we finish, we're going to come back out the same entrance. We're going to go up this carpeted ramp and across these mats behind us here. We call those our biosecurity mats. That is a fancy government word for a sponge with soapy water in it. And it is because our bats are suffering from a disease called white nose syndrome. White nose syndrome is a fungus that kills bats. It does not affect people, but as you walk through the cave, you pick this fungus up on your shoes. And if you were to leave us here today and go to another cave, you could expose those bats to this disease. So for that reason, we clean everybody's shoes at the end of all of our tours here. It's possible we could see a bat on our tour today. This is the time of year where bats are starting to make their way from their roost in the trees back into the cave. We have seen some bats flying around lately. So if you do see a bat on your tour today, please don't touch it. Okay, bats are wild animals and we don't want to disturb them. They're also mammals, which means that they can give us rabies. Nobody here at Mammoth Cave has ever gotten rabies. We don't want you to be the first. So please don't touch any bats on your tour today. If you come into contact with a bat voluntarily or involuntarily, please tell myself or Ranger Tegan before you leave so we can tell you how to take care of yourself. Any questions about that? That was a cicada that just fell out of the tree. Yeah, that's what that was. All right, good deal. So, this is the historic entrance of Mammoth Cave. This is the only natural entrance to the cave that we still tour today. And this is where it all started, folks. This is where people have been exploring Mammoth Cave for about the last 5,000 years, maybe even farther back than that. If you go back that far, there are people that live here in this area, and they have to hunt for their food. So you can imagine being one of those people walking along these hillsides during these warm Kentucky summer months, or maybe 90 degrees outside, 300% humidity, something like that. And you start to feel what we feel now, that cool cave air. Probably felt pretty good. And they might follow that down here and see this entrance just like we see it today. Big dark hole in the ground, beautiful waterfall falling over the edge of the entrance here. And that probably made them pretty curious, just like we are today. People are inherently curious about things like caves. You know, it's dark, but there's also something that draws us in and makes us want to explore these places. And these people were the same way. So we're going to talk about some of those earliest explorers on our tour today. We're also going to talk about modern settlers that moved in here in the late 1700s and something they found inside the cave that would prove to be vital to the independence of our fledgling nation. So if you're ready, folks, go ahead and get your tickets out. If you're in a group, you can hand all those tickets to one person. You're going to hand all those tickets to Ranger Tegan as we go down the stairs. She's going to give you a souvenir bag. Hey folks, we're going to stay to the right here and let this group up ahead of us pass.
How's it going, Jacob? Pretty good. Like we have a bigger tour than you. Yeah.
I think so. They're going right away.
Good shot.
Historic. Oh my goodness. 15 people.
This is some
Pretty pretty.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so how's this for a Mammoth Cave? Maybe you can start to figure out why we call this Mammoth Cave. You know, some of those earliest settlers in this area that came down into the Mammoth Cave hadn't been in buildings this big. This was the western frontier at that time, and that led them to say that this was truly a Mammoth Cave. And what became common practice for those people was to come down here into rooms like this, and they would build bonfires at different places around the room, light them all at once just for the fun of seeing this place lit up. That led them to discover that if you take a handful of this dry cave dirt and expose it to one of those open flames, that dirt begins to crackle and pop. So some of these people knew that that meant that there were minerals trapped inside the dirt that they could make use of. And that's when they constructed these boxes that you see in front of you here. They would fill these boxes up with cave dirt, use wooden pipes to bring that water in from the surface, and pour it on top of this dirt, catch the water as it comes out, pump it back up to the top, and boil it down. And at the end of that process, they had a crystal that they called saltpeter. Does anybody know what saltpeter was used for? Ammunition's close. It's a part of ammunition. Gunpowder. So saltpeter is 3/4 of what you need for gunpowder. And you can get saltpeter certain found in dry caves, like Mammoth Cave and other caves in the area. Dixon Cave and Salt Cave also produce a lot of saltpeter. There were a lot of little mom and pop shops in the area that made black gunpowder for settlers here on the western frontier, the late 1700s and early 1800s. Now, eventually something else would happen that made saltpeter even more important. In 1812, we decided to go back to war with England. Anybody remember the name of that war? The War of 1812. No, actually, so the War of 1812. We go back to war with England. England has the strongest navy in the world. They blockade all of our eastern seaports. Okay. Previously, we had imported most of our black gunpowder from India, which was an English colony at that time. We believe when we went to war with them, they stopped selling us gunpowder. And so near that time, Mammoth Cave becomes a serious industrial operation of salt. What you see up on the surface now did not exist in the early 1800s. This was all clear cut. There were no trees for miles. They had large furnaces and kettles for the boiling of this dirty water to produce this saltpeter. Mammoth Cave ends up producing about 400,000 pounds of saltpeter, and it gets packaged up and shipped to a young French chemist in Wilmington, Delaware, named E.I. DuPont. He's got a big contract with the federal government to provide them with black gunpowder during the war. So eventually, the War of 1812 comes to an end in about 1815. And the owners of the cave are kind of left wondering what they could do to make more money off this big hole in the ground. The price of saltpeter goes way, way down after the war. It's no longer worth it to continue producing that stuff here inside the cave. Eventually, one of them comes up with a crazy idea. He says that educated people from all around the world would show up to Mammoth Cave, and they would pay their hard-earned money just to walk around inside of it. How do y'all feel about that? Well, now we are part of an over 200-year-old tradition of guided cave tours here at Mammoth Cave. Our first guided cave tours began in about 1860, shortly after the end of that war. I also think it's important that we reflect on the people that were working down here in Mammoth Cave during the War of 1812. There was a labor shortage here in Kentucky, and apart from that, there weren't many people that wanted to work in the saltpeter mines. The owners of the cave leased slaves from states like Georgia and Tennessee to come work inside the cave. And you can come down here 24 hours a day, the 12-hour day shift or the 12-hour night shift. See about 70 slaves working inside the cave. Very hard manual labor. What they were doing, digging dirt, filling up these boxes, pumping that water back out to the surface all day. So I think it's important that we reflect on the people that work for our freedom, even though they wouldn't see it for themselves for over 50 years after that. What sort of questions do you have, folks? Anything you're curious about?
This is all reconstruction, huh?
Not right. This is all original, over 200-year-old artifacts. This is the way that they left it when they stopped production of saltpeter. Good question. Yeah, these are all original artifacts. We're going to see more of them up the trail here. You'll see some of those pipes that they made out of hollowed out tulip poplar logs off the side of the trail. And you'll see another set of these leaching vats as well. This is a natural ceiling. Yep, this is all of these cave passageways that we're going to see today are natural cave passageways. We're not going to see any man-made cave passageways. We'll see
Can't see it, but it's beautiful.
But all the passageways are natural. Now, when we talk about mining, all they were doing was shoveling dirt. They weren't using pickaxes or dynamite or anything like that down here. They would go to other parts of the cave and they would shovel dirt into carts and they would bring that dirt up here, pour it in the boxes, and when they were done with the dirt, they would discard it in whatever room they happened to be working in, and that's what we're standing on right now. We're standing on that discarded dirt from the saltpeter mining operation. Now there's a particular term that we have for this dirt, and it's a common phrase that we still use here, at least in Kentucky. I don't know about where you're from, but does anybody have a guess at what we call this dirt after it's been used up? So obvious after I say it. It's petered out. That's where that phrase comes from. This dirt has petered out. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, if we're not talking, yes, ma'am.
I mean, how do these form?
So we are walking in a dried up underground riverbed right now. Okay? Mammoth Cave and about 90% of caves in the world are made out of limestone. One of the very neat properties that limestone has is it dissolves in water. So because we have a limestone bedrock, most of our water flows underground because the water dissolves in holes in the limestone as it flows. And that water will slip underground and then it'll get into cracks between these layers of limestone and it will begin to dissolve away more limestone and create cave passageways like this. Yeah. So that's...
Would they have full here to create a circulation?
So what we have here is a convergence of two different streams of water, okay? And that's what's responsible for making this big room here. The shape of the ceiling is something that kind of happens naturally, okay? So you can imagine when this room was first being formed, there would have been a flat ceiling that went all the way across, okay? You see where that bottom shelf is? At one point, that would have been a continuous unbroken piece of limestone, right? So when the water drains away, the lower level passageways, the equilibrium shifts. Previously, when water had been adding buoyancy to the rocks and helping them stay in the position that they are, now that water is gone. So now there's more weight on the ceiling and on the walls now that the water's gone. Okay, so now some rocks are going to fall. So the heaviest part of the ceiling is where? It's in the middle, right? That's where the most weight is being borne, is in the middle of that ceiling. So that's the first part that falls out. So you get a big hole in the middle of the ceiling. Well, now where's the weak part of the ceiling? Anywhere touching that hole, right? So that's where the next rocks are going to fall. And they're going to keep doing that in almost a spiral pattern. It probably wasn't a perfect spiral pattern when it happened. But it would have looked kind of like a circle being formed just like this. And rocks continued to fall until the ceiling got itself into a position where it could support its own weight. And now what we're seeing is a dome. And these are shapes that we use in our architecture because they are so stable. We also use the shape of these narrower passageways, arches, in a lot of our architecture. So Mother Nature figured that stuff out way before we did. But that's what you're going to see a lot. Big rooms like this will often form these dome shapes, and the longer, narrower passageways will form those arch shapes. It's all the same thing, it's just the cave stabilizing itself. Great question.
When do you estimate the ceiling fell in?
When would we say that happened?
Yeah.
That's going to be on the order of millions of years ago. Yeah, when these passageways were first created. Good question. All right, folks. Well, let's go ahead and walk on to our next stop. We're going to walk for a little ways, and we'll see where we feel like stopping. Off to the left here, you're going to see those two poplar logs that they hollowed out and turned into pipes to bring water down here into the cave. Some of them are red oak as well. And then this instrument here is a climate monitor. Okay, so it monitors temperature and humidity, wind speed and direction. You'll notice there's two sets of logs. One brings water in, one pumps it out.
I can't see much of anything in this video. Yeah, these wood are preserved pretty good.
In the early 1800s, there are two different managers of the saltpeter mining operation here at Mammoth Cave. One is named Fleming Gatewood, and another was named Archibald Miller. And these guys both had a son. Fleming Gatewood's son was named George Slaughter Gatewood, and Archibald Miller's son was named Archibald Miller Jr. George Slaughter Gatewood and Archibald Miller Jr., the sons of these managers, became some of the first tour guides here at Mammoth Cave. The Millers were Irish immigrants, and the Gatewoods were, I believe, from Philadelphia. So they came down here to kind of try to live the American dream here at Mammoth Cave with the saltpeter mining operation. And what they ended up doing was managing a tourist attraction with George and Archibald Miller giving cave tours down here. Very young, maybe 14 or 15 years old when they're first starting to give tours. And no doubt the first people that showed up here to Mammoth Cave were friends and family of the Millers and the Gatewoods. People that they would write to and say, you'll never believe how big this cave is down in Kentucky. Why don't you come see it? We'll take you through. And so their friends and family would come down and they would spend all day down here, maybe 8 or 10, 12 hours walking through the cave. Of course, they're not walking on nice tour trails like we are today. They're climbing over piles of rocks and things like that as they go through here. And without electric lights, they're carrying lanterns. But that's what the first tours were like. And George Slaughter Gatewood eventually became a Baptist preacher. So this is called the church. And this may have been where some of the first air-conditioned church services were held during the summertime. So if you live here in the area in Kentucky back in the 1800s, you most likely belong to the Baptist faith. It may be time on Sunday morning, you get on the horse and you go round up the neighbors and say, hey, it's too hot, we're going to have church down inside the cave today. You all might all get together with your lanterns and come down here. And I don't know how many of you have been to a Baptist church service before, but start with some beautiful singing echoing off of the walls of these cave passageways. And then maybe some of them would, really get into it and start yelling and hollering and trying to shout the roof off of this cave. And then they'd all sit down. Maybe they'd sit back here on these logs that bring that water in. And George would come around and gather everybody's lanterns and sing up here on Pulpit Rock and put those lanterns behind them. Can you imagine in the darkness of the cave, George standing atop that rock with fire behind him, preaching about where you might be going? You might start to think you're already halfway there. Meanwhile, George has your lantern, so even if you were thinking about leaving, you've got no way out. You're stuck down here, as long as he's got all the lights. And we're told that George could preach a pretty good long sermon, as long as he had everybody's lanterns. Any questions y'all have at this point? Anything you're curious about? All right, let's move on a little bit.
This actually is so new.
About 3 years ago.
A couple of 3, okay.
Well, we're always working on stuff. They would have had hand drills down here in the early 1900s that were made out of iron. And over time, slowly got replaced with stainless steel handles. Probably starting in the 60s or 70s. The drills we're working on right now is put into the and all of our walls.
Yeah, another dome. It's hard to see though. It's a dome. Can't see it, but it's a dome.
They certainly had to come down with painters. Some parts of the cave eventually got gas light in them. And you turn on those boring gas lights to walk through. When they started to put in incandescent bulbs down here, big, huge light bulbs that they eventually we had more modern lighting systems. Found out that comes from the holes of technology that we have to be aware of. And we use LED lights, and that kind of takes care of the optical holes, so you can see what other problems are. What we have to do next. Cave art. Well, you know, there are some things that were drawn on the walls by those ancient Native Americans. And you could call them art. Some of them are definitely, well, are probably meant to depict something. Some of them look like something that you would do in the classroom when you were bored. Some of them look like some of the first doodles on the walls of the cave. But yes, they do exist.
Look at that. This is very, very good. Very beautiful. Look at that.
about the lighting inside the cave. So let's do something fun here and see what it would have been like for us on a tour in the 1800s. So I have my wire-framed open-face lantern here. Now this is modeled after a New England whale oil lantern, okay? But here in Kentucky, we don't have very many whales. So our tour guides had to get a little bit creative with their fuel sources. Instead of whales, what we have a lot of are pigs. So these are lard oil lanterns, or grease lanterns, is what they would have called them. So you collect all your lard oil after you make breakfast in the morning, and you use that as fuel for your lantern. So what does bacon and all that stuff produce a lot of when you burn it?
Soot.
Smoke, yeah, and soot, absolutely. So you can look up at the walls and the ceiling and see that soot left over from all these lanterns coming through here, burning these lard oils and greases as their fuel source. And you may notice that as I move about through the cave, it's a little precarious and my flame starts to get a little weak, right? You got to take care of that. Make sure it doesn't burn out. It might be difficult to get it lit again, especially if you don't have a government-issued big lighter like I do on your tour. So you always got to be aware of that, especially while you're walking along these piles of rocks and rubble and breakdown back here. You got to take care of your light. Somebody wrote about the first time they came in the historic entrance, and they said they walked about 20 yards into the entrance of the cave. And they ran into a rough stone-hewn wall with a wooden door set in the middle of it. And no sooner than they had opened that door than the flames of their lanterns were extinguished by the violence of the air from within. So do you remember feeling that breeze as you walked into the cave today? Well, these people had to walk into the cave backwards, or else that breeze from within the cave would put you into total darkness. And if we turn off our lights, we can experience the natural state of Mammoth Cave. What it would be like if you dropped your lantern, if you didn't protect your flame. Very few places where you can experience darkness like this, folks. Another one would be at the bottom of the ocean. But your eyes won't ever adjust to this. You'll never be able to see any better than you can right now down here. There are no animals up on the surface that can see any better than we can inside Mammoth Cave. Even night vision goggles don't work inside the cave. Totally dark. Not only is it totally dark, we're a very small group today. See how quiet you can get. Listen to the natural sounds of Mammoth Cave as well. There it is. Total darkness and total silence inside the cave. What tour? Oh, the Great Onyx tour? They take Coleman lanterns that produce about as much light as a dying sun. So you can light that cave up really well with 7 or 8 lanterns. That they take now. Light comes down and dissolves away the limestone. What's it eventually going to do with those caves? Well, it either close them off, or it's going to dissolve away enough limestone that the roof's going to fall in, right? So, those other caves that are very wet usually go through a life cycle. They will get so big that they can't support themselves, and then they will collapse and form a valley, and then a new cave will form, okay? Because Mammoth Cave doesn't have the water coming through the ceiling, our cave passageways remain stable for much, much longer. What happens is the water that ran through here that carved this passageway out, it's still in the cave. It's about 200 feet below where we are right now. Because this limestone dissolves in water, eventually that water carves its way down deeper and deeper into the limestone layer, and it'll start to form a new cave passageway that's connected to the old cave passageway. And the passageway will dry out, some rocks will fall, but then the cave stabilizes itself, and it remains stable because there's nothing else really affecting this cave passageway. Because of that good roof that we have over our heads. Keeps our cave nice and dry and nice and stable. That's the reason why Mammoth Cave is the longest cave in the world. Got a good roof over our heads. Good question. Yeah? Okay, so past this point, our tour is going to change a little bit. We're going to get away from these really big passageways. We're going to go to some smaller passageways. Okay, so I want you to watch your step and watch your head in the next part of our tour. We're going to see in the next part 2 pits. The first one is called Side Saddle Pit. You can look over the handrail and see down about 60 feet. You will get dripped on by cold water if you do that. That is the price of beauty. Okay. The next one is called the Bottomless Pit. Good news, we found the bottom. About 110 feet down from where we're standing. Okay, so we're going to cross the Bottomless Pit over a graded bridge. You can look down through that graded bridge and see all the way down to the bottom if you want to. Okay? Then we'll come to Fat Man's Misery. We'll kind of snake our way through there. Tall Man's Misery. We'll come out in a place called Great Relief Hall. We'll walk down to the end of Great Relief Hall to an area called River Hall, where we'll have some benches. That'll be the lowest point on our tour, about 310 feet below the surface, where we're going to meet up next, and we'll talk at those benches a little bit.
How
Okay?
far down are we right now?
Right now we're about 120 feet below the surface.
Okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
These were from the earlier settlers here, right?
Early tours, exactly.
Yeah. People writing their names here.
Most of this is going to be outright vandalism. People in the 70s when this was all a self-guided tour. This is dealing
Graffitis.
with a lot of historic signatures from the 1800s when that type of thing was allowed. Your tour guide would carry a couple candles with him on his tour. And back then, candles weren't made out of wax. They were made out of tallow, beef fat. So like lard oil and grease, what does beef fat produce a lot of when you burn it?
Graffitis.
Yeah, so you could light that candle and hold it up to the ceiling and make a little black dot. Do that over and over and over again until you get your name written on it. So a lot of that is candle smoke writing.
can't see it.
How many visitors go through this year?
Now, I think we have
E. Peters, right?
400,000 that visit the cave in a year.
Yeah.
And we'll have about
Man.
250,000 that visit the park every year. If you come here between Memorial Day and Labor Day, every one of these tours is going to be sold out every day, often days in advance. Yes.
More graffitis. Lots of graffitis out there. What is this? Bottomless pit?
It says side saddle pit.
Oh, this is not.
Side saddle what? Side saddle pit? Yeah.
Side saddle pit.
Oh, water's still dripping here. Yeah, there will be some stalactite and stalagmites gonna form there. Is that 1842 is that what it says? Ivanhoe. What pit is this?
This will be the bottomless pit.
Is that 8? Yeah, this is the bottomless pit. The 8. More graffitis. I'm sure a lot of these names came from the people working on these paths too, right?
A decent number of these names, unfortunately, are probably due to the 1970s. We opened up this area as a self-guided tour, and people took advantage of the low supervision.
Yeah. Low ceilings. Batman's Misery. There. Look how tight that is. And then my wife had a hard time moving through it. Well, we're not supposed to touch these stones, right?
Well, you have no choice. I mean, you have to be off balance.
Man. Wow. No, it's slippery over there.
Shit.
Wow. That was a tight fit.
So Mammoth Cave and explored. No, it has not. Still actively exploring and mapping Mammoth Cave. If I were a betting man, I would bet on more research being done in Mammoth Cave than any other cave in the world. Follow me, folks. See a lot more of that candle smoke running up on the ceiling here.
So what is that? Oh, okay.
Got some pretty old ones here, 1839. That would have been just a few years after these passageways were discovered.
Look at that. John Newton. Huh?
Have you actually used it on somebody?
I haven't.
What?
It has been used, yeah.
The AED? Because the
What?
plaster, I mean, it dries up if it's been unused for a long time.
What are you talking about?
It's just a defibrillator.
Oh.
Somebody has some.
You mentioned earlier the river is now 200 feet below us, right? Mm-hmm. Are you even worried that this is going to collapse?
If you look really closely,
No, not really. You got that. Remember that
bottom
weird
layer
thing
of
in
limestone
the
here
shape?
looks a lot different. That's called dolomite. That is limestone that has magnesium in it.
These are soot,
Yeah.
right?
A little bit of smoke, kind of a layer of smoke on the ceiling here.
I've had to see for a while, folks. These stairs right here are really special. You know, these are the last stairs on this tour that go down. So we got to get ready to start our journey back up, because like I said, we're at the lowest point on our tour right now. About 360 feet below the surface. This is called River Hall. Now, get into the late 1830s and the 1840s, and now a lot of the tour guides here at Mammoth Cave are enslaved individuals. People like Stephen Bishop, who was brought here by a wealthy lawyer from Glasgow who purchased the cave in 1837. He learned the tour routes people like George Slaughter Haywood and Archibald Miller Jr., and he was really good at it. He ended up kind of being a natural caver. But not only was he really good at it, people really liked Stephen Bishop. Now we have stacks of letters that people wrote to their families talking about how they need to come to Mammoth Cave and ask for Stephen to take them on a tour. We have letters from people that showed up to Mammoth Cave and expressed their disappointment when Stephen was unavailable for a tour. So somebody said that not only was Stephen a master of the cave, but he was also a master of people as well. And Stephen kind of became almost as famous as Mammoth Cave did itself. You know, he was kind of like a celebrity, people showing up here asking to go on his tours. And one of the reasons for this is because Stephen was an intrepid cave explorer. Whenever he wasn't giving tours, his owners had allowed him to come down into the cave, and he could do whatever he wanted to. There's nobody down here to tell him what to do. So Stephen quickly found out that he was afforded a level of freedom inside the cave that he was not up on the surface. So when Stephen first got here, they knew of about 20 miles, roughly, of cave passageways. Stephen discovered that much more of the cave by himself. Took his little lantern, wore his overalls, went by himself, and kept making tremendous discoveries. He was the first person to come down here to where we are now, and he walked down the passageway behind us, found an underground river. He brought a boat down, went to the other side of that underground river, and found an entirely unexplored section of Mammoth Cave that no one had been in yet, with undisturbed gypsum crystals growing on the walls. We call that now Cleveland Avenue. It's part of our Grand Avenue tour. Also our accessible tour goes into Cleveland Avenue. And this helped propel the fame of Mammoth Cave again, because Mammoth Cave lacks a lot of things that other caves have, like stalactites and stalagmites. This beautiful gypsum formation was something that they could market to people, that people would come and see, because not a lot of other caves have this beautiful gypsum. So as this continued on, they gave Stephen more and more opportunities to come down into the cave, because he just kept making incredible discoveries. So Stephen is probably the most famous tour guide that ever has been and ever will be here at Mammoth Cave. There were other individuals that worked here, like Nick and Matt Bransford, who were leased from their owner in Nashville, Tennessee, brought up here to give cave tours. Nick and Matt eventually made their way down here to the rivers, and they would catch the eyeless fish that live in the river, and they would sell them to academic institutions. They might sell them to you on your cave tour if you were willing to buy one. They saved up enough money that they bought their own freedom. They bought their freedom papers from their owner, and were able to earn their freedom that way. So Mammoth Cave has been able to give a sort of freedom to many different groups of people over the last couple hundred years. We're about to make our way up through a long, windy passageway. Eventually we'll come out into a vertical cave passageway called Mammoth Dome. Stephen called that his greatest discovery. There's a vertical cave passageway that's been made from a sinkhole that's formed up on the surface, allowing water to come in and carve out vertically as the water falls down. So we'll get to walk all the way up to the top of that. What questions do you all have at this point?
How far back is that cave?
It goes as far back as you want to go. Eventually it goes to a completely different part of the cave. Like I said, if you take those river passageways on over to the other side to a place called Cascade Hall, you walk up and come to the Snowball Dining Room in Cleveland Avenue. You can walk down Boone Avenue 4 miles to the frozen Niagara and come out of the cave there. You can go as far as you want to back that passageway. If you go about 1/8 of a mile back that passageway is when you come to the river.
Okay.
And our River Styx tour does that. They come down to where we are now. We have to take lanterns. It's not electrically lit back there. We come down here, we turn some lanterns on and go back there and see the river.
So how many miles of cave area that you can go to?
So we tour about 14 miles of Mammoth Cave, and that is, out of 412 miles of cave passageways that we have mapped. And we're still actively exploring Mammoth Cave. Stephen Bishop explored Mammoth Cave up until he passed away. His owner eventually died, and in his will he wrote that 7 years after his death he wanted Stephen to be free, and so he was. And Stephen was an educated man. He went on a lot of tours with some of the smartest people in the world. Professors, lawyers, doctors were coming to visit Mammoth Cave, and Stephen got to interact with all these people. He became very well educated. And after he gained his freedom, he wanted to go to Liberia, which was a colony of freedmen, and he wanted to help them by becoming a lawyer. And he had plans to do this, but there was always a part of Mammoth Cave that he wanted to explore. And every time he'd get to the end of the passageway that he wanted to explore, he'd find another one. And he did that until he passed away here at Mammoth Cave. So he continued to do what he loved to do, which was exploring these cave passageways. And people still explore Mammoth Cave today. We've mapped 412 miles of Mammoth Cave. There's no end in sight. That's as far as we can tell. We have what's called a book of leads that is hundreds and hundreds of pages long, names of passageways that nobody's ever been to before. Just on this tour route, there are about 30 pages of leads of passageways that nobody's ever been to. So there's still a lot more of Mammoth Cave to explore.
Is it open to more active volunteers?
If you are part of the organizations that we give permits to, you can go on those sorts of trips. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get in with them. They require pretty thorough vetting with proof of experience and stuff like that. But they do let new people join all the time. Yeah. Good questions. Any more? While I give you some more time to rest. All right, let's start heading up.
What is this? Okay, having a hard time focusing. This one right here.
So I told you most of Mammoth Cave does not have cave formations in it, but this area is one of our exceptions on this tour. So I'll go ahead and point out the few that we do have on this tour route. One here, these are called flowstone formations, and they're the result of water running down these walls and redepositing limestone as it flows over these rock walls. This is called the Angel's Wing, and there's some up there in the corner as well. This flowstone formation over here is a little bit bigger. When we get significant rain up on the surface, this passageway actually produces a stream of water. This little passageway up here. Water will run out of that and run down this wall, and that's what's creating what we call the butterscotch waterfall here. So that's another flowstone formation. And then up here, up above me, are just a few stalactites clinging to this rock ledge. You can see the water that's draining them still dripping from the inside. Is that falling?
Can it open year round or just seasonal?
Every day except Christmas.
All right.
This is going to be the last time we're going to stop together as a group before we make our way back out to the entrance. Does anybody have any questions? Anything that I haven't answered so far on your tour that you're curious about? Well, I'd like to leave you with a couple final thoughts here. Mammoth Cave became a national park on July 1st, 1941. We didn't know Mammoth Cave was the longest cave in the world until 1972. That's not why Mammoth Cave is a national park. The reason why Mammoth Cave is a national park is because of the things that we've been talking about over the course of our tour today. Mammoth Cave is an incredible natural resource. It's the longest cave in the world, 412 miles of cave passageways. It's also an incredible cultural resource. Mammoth Cave has meant so many different things to so many people over the last 1,000 years, 5,000 years. That's why Mammoth Cave is a national park. For me, Mammoth Cave is home. This is where I grew up, 12 minutes down the road. I spent many mornings sitting on the porch of the house I grew up in looking into Mammoth Cave National Park. And now I get to come here, and for some reason all these people are so willing to follow me into a dark hole in the ground, and then they have to listen to me tell them about why my home is what I think is the coolest place in the world. So that's what Mammoth Cave means to me. I hope over the course of this tour today, you've found something that means something to you, or maybe you're interested in learning more about Mammoth Cave. We've really only scratched the surface on our 2-hour-long tour today. So I hope you're inspired to come back and maybe learn a little bit more. If not, I totally understand. There's about 419 other national park sites out there, and some of them don't even have caves in them, okay? You got seashores, lake shores, battlefields, monuments, national recreation areas, just about anything you can think of out there. I hope you do go find one that's special to you. On behalf of the National Park Service, myself, Jacob, and my excellent partner and good friend in the back, Ranger Tegan, we want to thank you all for coming out today and supporting us here at Mammoth Cave. Let's go get some sunlight. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
All right.
Is this a World Heritage Foundation site?
What's that?
UNESCO, is it a WHS site?
It is a World Heritage
Okay.
Site, yeah, as well as an International Biosphere Reserve.
Oh.
This is the dome. We were here earlier. That was it. The end.
Oh.